I'm Eva, and on my license it says my maiden name as well, Eva Hummel Jones. And so if you ever look up the case with the state of Missouri, it's under Hummel Jones versus the state of Missouri. And I guess what I'm going to do, I don't have any visuals or anything. I'm just going to tell my story. I have 6 kids, and with the first one, I started researching midwifery and home birthing and out-of-hospital births, delivery. And then for a lot of reasons, we decided, we'll just go to the hospital with this one. The second one, we went in full bore and decided to go with a midwife. And we went to her location. This was in the middle of January, real cold in Missouri, 20 degrees or so. And while we were there, we were raided by 7 county and state officials. 4 were visibly armed. The baby was born in the evening, and like 6:41, and about 4 hours later, there was a knock on the door. Someone who pulled at my heartstrings because he was a vet, and he was getting ready to go to. What was the name of it? I'm reaching a blank. He was going to go Desert Storm, I believe. And he wanted to borrow the phone. This is back before cell phones were so prominent. And I let him in, and he was the point man. So a few hours later, 2:15 in the morning to be exact, another knock on the door. I had just had a baby at 6:41, and the midwife had taken care of everything and then left. So it was my husband and I and our 2-year-old toddler and a newborn. And we were at this midwife's cabin, basically 2-bedroom, kitchen, living room combo, very comfortable. But as you go to a hotel, you have an expectation of privacy, right? So it was with us. And anyway, getting back to the 2:15 in the morning, knock on the door. My husband answered this time, and a deputy sheriff stood there, and he appeared to be by himself, and he was shoving this search warrant in front of my husband, and my husband very calmly and courteously asked him if this could wait until the morning, and that didn't stop him at all. He just pushed the door open, and behind him, unbeknownst to my husband's, it wasn't in his view, were those 6 other people. One from the Board of Healing Arts, one from the Attorney General's office, 2 city police, and another sheriff's deputy, or actual sheriff, and then another one from the county's prosecuting attorney. And they immediately came to the bedroom where I had the baby and started asking questions. I was a little bit groggy and finally got my senses and said, I'm not going to answer any more questions. I'm going to talk to a lawyer first. Our first impression was maybe they're looking for a drug, a fugitive, somebody out there that's being chased by the law. But at any rate, I stopped talking, my husband stopped talking, and they proceeded to take everything they wanted out of the midwife's cabinets and drawers and shelves, and she lost thousands of dollars worth of her equipment. She had at that time 38 women on her books being seen by her, and I'll explain. The state of Missouri at that time, their law about midwifery was very, very vague. You could have a certified nurse midwife, you could have a registered nurse, which was what I had, and she was also a midwife, but very well respected by the medical community. And then you could have like a granny midwife, like the Amish used, lots and lots of experience, but no paper, no formal education to back it up. So anyway, since then the law has changed, but our lawsuit was a big part of why that happened. Anyway, they stood there. They were in the cabin with us for 3 hours, digging all this stuff up. At one point, the deputy sheriff went and took pictures of my nightgown and underwear soaking in the sink, took pictures of that. That's evidence. And he came in with his gloves and his plastic bags and everything and packed up the sheet that I'd been laying on. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to force the issue of the midwife operating a surgical unit without a medical license. Later on, we found out in depositions that had to take place because we sued the state of Missouri. We found out in depositions that they had followed us all that morning because we had been down there in the morning of that day, and my progression was going slow, so we went around to a shopping mall. We went walking around, but they had followed us during this whole time. We also found out that the deputy sheriff that was leading this raid was, in fact, a patient of the head of the Board of Healing Arts for the state of Missouri, and they had colluded to do this to basically ruin this midwife. And it was very political, but all in all, we survived. At one point, the deputy sheriff was pulling things out of my bag, and I looked right at him and I said, "That's my bag." And he stopped, looked me right in the eye and said, "We have the right to do and take anything we want." And they literally did. They took paper bags, just like 50 of them, I don't know, just one right after the other out the door. And this was 20-degree weather, like I explained. And they left the door open while they were doing this. And here we were trying to keep it like 80 degrees in there for this newborn. And also one little interesting thing, they wouldn't let us go into the kitchen to make a bottle for our toddler. It was just one thing after another, and I was pacing like a really almost a rabid mama bear. I was pacing and walking all over, and this one big, huge policeman, did I say 4 of them were visibly armed? Okay. This guy seemed to be assigned to me, and he would follow me. So when I went back to the bedroom to nurse the baby, there was this big cop standing there in the doorway watching. Well, he would turn around, I think, but it was very awkward. So that's my story. I think I left a lot out because I think I'm supposed to keep this to 10 minutes, but does anybody have any questions or anything? I mean, it was very traumatic, and I will say that for months, even years. This was not settled until I think my baby was like 3.5 years old. It was not settled. On the phone constantly, I don't mean 24/7, but I was spending months talking to reporters and the lawyers and friends and family, explaining this whole happening. And a lot of times I'd be nursing this baby, and I know that it affected him in a negative sort of way. And if I had known that in the beginning, that it would have such an effect on him, I would have made a lot more stink. But anyway, that's why I was a big proponent for home birthing, and for the rest of the children that we had, we didn't have them at her clinic. We came to our house and we just had the babies at home. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, what specifically did you sue? What was the state for?
Unlawful search and seizure. Unlawful search and seizure.
And did you win?
What happened was, We were proceeding with depositions and everything, and this was a very unusual case because 80% of this midwife's clientele were Amish, and they would not have done this. We decided we have to make a statement and not let this happen to anybody else because it was very traumatic. So we sued the Board of Healing Arts, the state of, I think everybody except the Attorney General. I don't know, I don't remember why we made a deal with them or something. That was in the lawyer's hands, but at one point it was thrown out. It was thrown out. And our lawyers had to make the decision of whether or not to go back to the District Court of Appeals and make a case. They have 4 minutes to discuss and tell the 3 judges up in their great big benches about the whole scenario, and 4 minutes persuade them to throw it back into court. And they did. One of the judges even kind of chuckled and said, well, it's okay to have a baby wherever you happen to be at the moment. It was kind of funny. But they did. They threw it back into court, and then at that point, all the parties involved wanted to just settle outside of court. And that's what we did. And that was really a blessing because it would have just gone on forever. So anyway, we did survive. And anybody else have anything? Yes? Well, the state of Missouri, several times, the Missouri Midwives Association tried to get the legislature to make it totally clean, the law in Missouri, and finally, after several attempts, so that went on for 5 or 6 years after that, maybe 10, and they finally did get it passed as okay to have a midwife. Anybody else? Oh, okay.
So why wasn't it okay to have, as the judge said, a baby anywhere you want, anybody?
Well, it ultimately is. I mean, if you're in a taxi on the way to the hospital, or if you happen to be in a cornfield picking corn, or that happened to my sister-in-law, that's why I said that. It is okay.
Why couldn't you use the midwife? That was your free agency, your choice. Why could you not use that woman for your midwife?
Well, basically, that is why we got it thrown back into court, probably because it should have been okay. It was not illegal because the law was too vague. What they wanted to do, their primary purpose in that raid, was to make an example of that midwife. She was slapped with like 7 or 8 misdemeanors and 2 or 3 felonies, and so she had to fight the legal battle as well.
Missouri wanted to put midwives in business? Or just her?
Oh, they wanted to make midwifery illegal totally in Missouri. They wanted to put the clamp on it, and they were going to use her as an example. Yes?
Do you know of any other states that's illegal?
I really don't. Mm-mm. I should have researched that a little bit before I came here, but yeah. Anybody else? I think there's a couple more speakers, so I'll go.